Join us. How wonderful to be with all of you this morning on this spring day. I don't know what, I thought April showers bring May flowers. I'm not sure what May showers bring. June abundance, perhaps. So welcome to all of you. I'm Wendy Goldberg, and I'm so excited to be here today for our formal introduction to Pastor Anna Camphouse. And thank you all for joining us for what will be a very informal conversation. And I invite you in to add to our questions that we've kind of curated to get started. So as a very first question, and as a means for introduction as well, why UCC, why Countryside, why Omaha? What about this opportunity appeals to you?
Yeah, so the reason she's saying why UCC is because I am an ordained United Methodist minister who is doing so. She went, yay. So yeah, as a consequence, I've spent 20 years in Methodist ministry. This year is my 20th year in Methodist ministry, so I'm starting 21st year, making a jump to the UCC. Now I have liked the UCC for some time because of its social justice stances and its embrace of loving the Lord with all your mind. I find that a lot of the UCC churches are very thoughtful, well-read learners. And so I really like that. Not to say the Methodists are not, but I think these things kind of go together in some ways, and I have enjoyed that. And so I've actually, about 11 years ago, took a UCC history and polity course, which now all of a sudden is a great thing to have, as I have applied for and received what's called dual standings. So I have standing in the Methodist Church, but also standing in the United Church of Christ. And so why UCC? Because I've always liked them. But why Countryside and why Omaha? I think why Omaha is because Countryside is in Omaha and it's doing this amazing thing here. And so the Countryside, as part of the Tri-Faith Initiative, and particularly this job, sings to my soul in so many different ways. And it's really the way that they have written up this job description is all the things that I most love to do in one job description. And so my role as the interim minister of engagement and formation is this combination of trying to help be the Christian minister voice of Tri-Faith, and then also to do the Christian education programs, which includes the Center for Faith Studies and other things, all the small groups, the book studies, Bible study, all of those things. How we live out our discipleship in those ways is part of what I do here. And so that's why, but this Tri-Faith Initiative is right down my alley. I've done Parliament of the World's Religions for 3 out of the past 4 meetings for them. I've done multiple interfaith collaborative things, and I think we're going to talk some more about that as you ask some more questions, but that's really the why. But I was really impressed that Omaha is such a neat city. You know, I think I would have come if it was in random spot in Montana or in random spot in, Tennessee. I think I would have gone to this kind of a place, this kind of a church, wherever it was. But I have been delighted that Omaha is such a neat place with so many good people and good food and cool things on how you park your car downtown. I'm like, why isn't everybody doing this? Where the apps, you're in a store and you're like, I need an extra hour. I mean, there's a limit, but you're like, I need an extra hour, so I don't have to go back to my car. I can just push the button. Why aren't people doing this? This is so much more hospitable than other cities where they're like, no, seriously, you need to leave, and move your car or whatever. And so I like that. And I love the fact that Eastern Nebraska looks so much like where I grew up, which is South Alabama. If you've never been to Southeastern Alabama, all you got to do is travel like 20 minutes west of here, and it looks just like that. It looks just like that. Different accent, but otherwise it looks just like that. So I felt very much at home here.
That's great. You've started to tell us a little bit, but tell us about some of your first impressions. Let's start at Countryside.
So Countryside is a really amazing church full of really amazing people. So the building itself is sort of extraordinary, and Rick is on here, and he helped put together all the things for how this building came to be. Some of the things that I like most about it are its climate consciousness. So one of the questions that I asked when I first got here is like, so do I get a trash can in my office? And they're like, no. We have a recycle in your office. And if you have trash, like, let us see the trash, because we need to, here's the compost, here's the soft plastics, here's the, so they are really living this out, and I'm like, oh, so you got to get up and walk out and put make sure that your trash is actual trash for the landfill, because we are decreasing our carbon footprint. And while a lot of churches talk about that, this church believe it. And I was like, this is good. This is awesome. And plus I get extra steps, when I actually have trash, because I got to walk and then walk back. So it's good, because I'm very climate justice, but I was like, wow, this church is really doing it. And all the lights, so, it's sort of magical. The motion sensor lights are magical, right? Because you walk in a room and it's like, hello, welcome to this room. The lights are now on, but they also turn off automatically. So those kinds of things. The building is gorgeous. And one of my favorite things about the building is that every room in the building that's named, not the sanctuary, but like the meeting rooms in the building, all of them are named after biblical women, because so often women have been overlooked or kind of put to the side within the history of the Christian tradition. And so I love that they embraced, get to know your women of the Bible. And I was super jazzed that one of the rooms is named Anna. That was pretty, I know that's sort of self-serving, but I really liked that. So there's that. And then in terms of the people, every person that I meet here is like incredible. They are so committed. They are so intelligent. They are so like awesome people that have done all these different things. I do not have time in 1 hour to go into that in any depth, but it's like y'all took so many, not all, because I know there's awesome people also at Temple Israel and also awesome people also at AMI, but this does seem to be a collaborative effort of people that have done an incredible amount of good in the world. And they just all came here and said, let's do good together. And that's very exciting for me. Wendy is one of those that I've been very impressed. I'm like, wow, but Rick, there's so many people that they're just awesome. So I really want to highlight that in the coming weeks. I have ideas about how to do that. So yeah.
Exciting. So one of my, I think many of us here on this call are followers of Krista Tippett, and Krista often starts her session, I think always starts her session with, tell us about the spiritual journey of your childhood. Would like to extend that a little bit further. I know that so much of the reason that you're here is because of the many things that you have experienced, and that you bring that with you. So could you tell us a little bit about, perhaps starting with your childhood, your spiritual path, and how that brings you to today?
Sure. So I grew up in UCLA, the unknown corner of Lower Alabama. And that little area is pretty conservative Christian, and really conservative Christian Protestant more than, it doesn't have a whole lot of Catholic influence. When you go to the other side of Alabama, to Mobile and those areas where the French settled, you get more Catholicism. But in the area where I grew up, you were either Methodist, Baptist, or Pentecostal, or you didn't go to church at all for the most part. And being the Deep South, there are all of the isms are things that they're still trying to work their way through and out of. And so I grew up in that context. And so I've sort of come a long way in terms of my understanding of things in a multicultural context, in a global perspective. And so but I always had, even from young age, an understanding that I was in relationship with God. And so even as a child, I would sit for long hours and talk to God under the pecan trees at my house, and just talk to God about my questions, talk to God about my day, and really be a friend of this force that governs the universe that we call God, that is in and around and works through all the things. And so I started with a pretty firm faith and Christian foundation, lots of Christian camp, and at all the vacation Bible schools every week, during the summer, all of that. I was a very well churched kid. So that's one thing. But as I grew older, and I took my faith seriously from a young age, but I started asking questions, like really questions. I can still remember the look on the preacher's face, but he almost choked in his popcorn the day that I asked, so why is God a he? Right? Why does it say that? Is there any feminine part to God? And so these were questions I had of the Bible. I guess I probably was in junior high, right? And he choked because I asked it in front of people, and that was an uncomfortable question to be asking in my little Methodist church in the Deep South. And so, but I began to ask those questions, and then I continued to ask them as I went forward. And I ended up, after nursing school in Mobile, going to seminary at Claremont School of Theology, which is in Southern California, in the LA area. And I got my master's and doctorate there. And at that place, that was a place where it could handle all those questions, because that was a place where interfaith dialogue and multicultural conversations were part of the ethos of the school. And I went to seminary with people who were Methodist, who were Unitarian, who were UCC, but also who were Wiccan and Buddhist and agnostic. And so it's sort of this mix of people. And it was about that same time that I also went to Asian World Institute for a summer and saw this incredible diversity of people, because that was like living on a at the UN on a farm in Japan, and everyone got to share from their own tradition. There were Hindus and Catholics and Buddhists and Shinto and atheists, and like all these people coming from leaders of NGOs of developing countries came and learned how to do sustainable agriculture, organic farming, and community development together for a harvest year. And I got a chance to work alongside them and to get to know them, and each person's devotions that we all listened to were like the world in miniature. And that I was pretty young when that happened. I was, I think 23 or 24. I think I turned 24 that year. And so that really made an impression on me that, oh my gosh, here we are, we can do this, we can listen, and not just in a seminary, but on a farm, like regular people just doing this thing together. And then later in 2004, I discovered the Parliament of the World's Religions. And I was like, wow, so 10,000 people from 200 different faith groups in 80 different countries can come together and talk about climate justice and talk about empowering young people, indigenous people, women. Like, we can talk about these things, and we can do this without proselytizing, but just richly appreciating one another's faith. This is a thing. Why aren't we doing this everywhere? If peace is really a choice, then how come we're not doing this everywhere? So it was a natural thing for me to have a deep resonance with this particular thing and this particular role, because I've already been doing this for some time. And so after those experiences in Japan, at the Parliament, I began to be much more intentional about learning, not just from books about other faiths, but really spending time in other faith communities, and doing things, meditating with those who follow Paramhansa Yogananda and learning their styles of meditation and things like that, or going to the Buddhist shrines and doing those kinds of things, or praying at the mosque, different things, as you get going to Yom Kippur with my friends, Temple Israel Hollywood, or all these different things, because I think that we are enriched by learning with one another's traditions, and by being alongside one another in that, by being wholehearted as we embrace one another and love one another into who we are becoming. That's a really long answer. There's my answer.
Thank you. It was beautiful. We're good with you talking. That's why we invited you to spend the whole hour with us.
This is the whole hour.
This is the Anna show.
I'm giving you a full answer. Often I don't talk this much. If you've been in conversation with me, it's more of a give and take. But since it's get to know Anna, I'm talking longer than I normally do.
Thank you. So here's kind of a deeper dive into the same question, which is, can you tell us a core value for you? Can you define that core value? And then can you tell us a story that exemplifies that core value?
Yep. Many stories. But so loving kindness. Loving kindness is a core value for me. And basically, I see it as the embodiment of compassion and care that leads to reaching our highest potential. Okay, so loving kindness is sometimes giving and doing extra for somebody, and sometimes it's putting boundaries where people can have space and things like that. It manifests a lot of different ways, but I can tell you that the most important moments of my life are times that I have been exhibiting loving kindness towards somebody else, or other people have exhibited loving kindness towards me. And so I feel like in the context of my life, it's just stories. It's a collection of stories of different people sharing loving kindness moments with me. And then there's breaks in between where people are having their own issues. But for the most part, if I look at the arc of my life, it's loving kindness to loving kindness to loving kindness. So there have been transformative moments of loving kindness, and there have been just like most, the basic but beautiful. I want to kind of go with something that I could talk about transformative, but I want to start with the basic and beautiful. So when I first got here, I had never been to Omaha, like never. Never been to Nebraska. Never really been to states that bordered Nebraska, except for I went to like one little part of Wyoming, Jackson Hole, Wyoming at one point, because I was over in Montana at Yellowstone and I just kind of went over there. But otherwise I didn't know anyone. So in a time period where everyone is new, even if you end up with lifelong friends, if every single person you meet is new, it can get really lonely, right? Because you haven't had time to build those relationships and stuff. And for me, I was separated from my family because they were finishing up stuff in California. My family just arrived again yesterday at 4. It's really great to be back with them. But those first few weeks were, kind of hard and a lot of times lonely, right? But when I said that I was coming, so my best friend and her mother, who are in Alabama, right? They decided that what they were going to do was get in the car and drive to Omaha. to be with me and to help me feel loved and nurtured and to celebrate this new move in my life. Right. This is extraordinary. And I'm not finished yet, because when they came, full transparency, I don't like to cook. I can cook. I don't love it. So I have other people that I befriend who love to cook. And then I say, let me be your friend. So, but this, I mean, everybody's got their thing. Mine is cooking, I could take it or leave it. Eating, I love, but cooking, not so much. And my husband does most of the cooking at our house as a consequence of all that. So my best friend, Eileen, she loves to cook, and her mama was with her. They came and I went to I said, what do you want? And they told me these things to get from the grocery store, and I got them. And I swear to you, I'm still eating out of my freezer, like a month later, some of the things that they packed my freezer with, so that even when they left, they were here for like 4 days, even when they left, I had home cooked meals to take to work with me and to just make my life a little bit easier. That is a simple thing, but it was profound, and it made me feel loved ongoing. And now my cook, AKA my husband, is back, which I'm really happy. Yeah, those kinds of moments they're simple, but they are profoundly loving.
Thank you. I invite others to start to add some questions in the chat as those come up for you. My next question for you, Pastor Anna, is what does living religion mean to you?
Yeah, so I thought about this, and I was wondering where you were going with it, but where I thought about, because some of these questions, she kind of go, what do you think about this? So living religion to me is the difference between having a religion that's more of an academic practice and having a religion that's alive within you and within the community. And so I think that there are those who do study, and all the religions are worth studying, because at different points in time, even those that people don't practice anymore are worth studying, to look at the lens of where God, relationship with God was made manifest in a particular way. This is really interesting to learn about. But for me, living religion is about being in an ongoing relationship with the divine through a particular lens. And so my lens is Christianity, and understanding Jesus, but also understanding to the extent that I'm able, the Jewish community that Jesus came from, and also understanding, how the Christian tradition has kept on going in its relationship with others throughout history, because this is not the only time that Jews, Muslims, and Christians have worked together on different things. So a while back, we're talking about, and maybe you still are, and I'd be happy to help with that, going to Spain to study a little bit about how they did it back then, right? So learning. But in terms of living religion, that is the way that we actually act out our faith through this particular tradition.
Thank you.
No problem. And by the way, I do see in the chat that there are all also, I noticed, I see Sierra and Jim, and yay. Hello, my people. Hello, my people.
We're all going to be your people.
Oh, yes. Y'all are all my people. But they were reaching out as Methodists, and I'm also saying, hello to them in the Wesleyan way.
Right.
Oh, it was very exciting to see a Methodist appointed. So
great. So my next question is, what does collaborative global justice look like, and in particular in an interfaith lens?
That question should be a dissertation topic, really, right?
Well, we can just get started.
Right.
Remember this whole thing is a marathon, not a sprint. So we're just looking for what ideas you're bringing to all of the seeds that we already have planted.
In spite of the fact that I'm talking a lot in this moment, my big thing is listening. That was my dissertation topic, is listen, God bearing in practice, right? So I think that listening is love. Deeply listening to someone helps midwife what the Spirit is doing, because God's already working in people's lives. That's already a thing. And the better you can listen to someone, the more you can kind of hear what the Spirit is doing and help midwife that into our collective reality. So usually when I see problems between, or hangups where people can't move forward on collaborative models or collaborative justice, someone is not able to listen and integrate what they're hearing. There can be a lot of reason for that. People are hurt people end up hurting people. People are scared. People have been abused. There's a lot of good reasons why people can't listen, because listening is also a vulnerable space, because real listening is about being able to put whatever it is that's your narrative over here to the side for a minute to make space to hear the other person. Effective listening is not a half listening. Effective listening is not a space where somebody goes, da, 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 and then you go, before they even finish, already you're forming your response. Real listening is about giving people time and space to express themselves to the best of their ability, and you're really paying attention. And many times you will not have an immediate answer. The best listening, often you don't have an immediate answer, but you just say, I hear you. I hear this, this, and this. Let me think about that, and I'll get back to you when I've processed it. Because I think if we did this with more intention, because I see Mark on here, and I bet he's got the amen corner on this, because he's a clinical psychology professor, right? But a lot of times too, if you listen to somebody out, you're doing two things. Number one, you're saying, I value you and I appreciate you for who you are. Number two, a lot of problems get solved by the person talking, if you just hear them to the end of their thing, because they hear themselves talk and they're like, wait, I didn't mean it that way. So, or I meant this other thing. And then you ask appropriate questions and stuff. So I think if we were able and willing to work on our own stuff, and then to open up spaces where we listen better and really sought to understand and not just be understood, that this is a very, very healing thing. And it would be a healing thing in our world. So one of the things that I love about the Tri-Faith Initiative is all of these different opportunities that we have to listen to each other. And I hope that we are working on doing that well, because I think insofar as we're able to make the space to truly listen and seek to understand, those are the spaces we're going to be able to midwife what the Spirit is doing and do something new and creative and collaborative and wonderful. And that has a ripple effect, because all of a sudden people see it's possible.
Thank you. So I realize, and Ellie, I appreciate your question, and I think I need a question before we get to your question. So could you help those here today understand what the intention of Countryside has set by having two interim ministers? What are the kinds of things you're discerning with the congregation and leading, and particularly following this question of listening and discerning with the congregation? And how does that then feed into Allie's question about the potential of what comes next for you?
Yeah, so we're dating right now, us in the church. So Countryside in this in the period between the time that the prior ministers left and they were figuring out, well, what do we do now? Like, actually, this process kind of started when Eric left. Then they started collaborating with one another on like, oh, well, what do we do now? And before, after Eric left, but before Chris left, they started coming up with a collaborative model of ministry. And could that be a thing? Right. And then it ended up also that Chris decided to do different things with her ministry, but that people that were left said, well, we still like to try the collaborative leadership model. And so let's see what happens with that. And so we're sort of in a grand experiment right now. Countryside is a congregational church. And that means that every major decision, before it becomes like a rule, you could try new things, but before it becomes a rule, the congregation has to vote on it. They have to think about it and process it, and then they vote on it. And so it was a strange time with COVID, where people were disconnected and had and sometimes communication was a challenge or whatever, but now we're getting back together and we're starting to get more people's voices on how they feel about the collaborative model and these different things. But in terms of interim, what we were told in coming in is, we want you to be the interims. We will be having discernment about all these things, the collaborative model and the interim, and who is going to be the ongoing pastor, the settled pastor, not ongoing pastor, who's going to be the settled pastor. So we'll form a search committee and those things. If things are going well and you think you want to be considered, we'll let you be considered for that settled position. But it's an interim. It might be longer, but maybe not. It depends on whether we want to stay and put our name in the hat to potentially be the person, but they're also going to look, at more people, right? Because inevitably what we want is the best for Countryside. And we're here to help that process be facilitated in this interim time, to make sure that whoever y'all end up with is truly the best person for the job. Is that about right, Rick? I'm gonna lean on Rick for a second here because he's also a guru of all things Countryside.
No, that is correct. I mean, we're testing, like I said, this collaborative leadership model. I've heard people like it. I've heard people say they want a senior pastor and associate pastor, but so we've got to go through a discernment to see if that's the approach that we want our structure to be. And at the same time, we need to facilitate a search in terms of what do we want in settled ministers, and they could or they could not be Pastor Anna or Pastor Tracy, and it just depends on how that all goes. So, and that usually takes 12 to 18 months. So there's a time period in here to be able to, as Anna said, date a little while and then see how things go. So it's good to have two interim ministers that are engaged from the very start and working well right now with us. So that's very helpful, especially after COVID, after two ministers leave. We haven't hardly even been in the building actively a year, and Sharon shakes her head, that this will be exciting to be able to get back together, get that discussion going and see where it leads us.
Thanks, Rick. So then Allie's question is, so with in the middle of COVID, in the middle of, systemic injustice with so much uncertainty and chaos, why would you come for something that doesn't necessarily, have a forever date? Pick up your whole family and move to Omaha, Nebraska. Like, are you crazy?
Yes. Obviously. No, I'm not actually officially mentally ill. I can say that. But I am the type of person that is open to and follows a call. So I find, and this is not the first time that I've drugged my family across the country for something. That lasted a couple of years, and then I was drugged back across the country. Long story. So yeah, and so what happened here was, I really was praying about where I was going to go next. I was in Bishop, California, but I had discerned, for a number of reasons, that I really needed to do something else. And so, I kind of put it out there in prayer. And then, I told the bishop, I'm like, hey, I'm looking at these things, and one of the people that I reached out to, and I started looking nationally, not at Nebraska though, not in any state that borders Nebraska. But I talked to my good friend, Diana Butler Bass. And I told her, I was like, do you mind if I use you as a reference as I just kind of start looking at all these different places? And so she's like, oh yes, please use me as a reference or whatever. And then like a couple months later, I get a random text from her that says, hey, have you ever heard of this Countryside UCC in Omaha? And I could honestly say no, right? I was like, what is this? I said, Nebraska? Like Nebraska? And then I don't have anything against Nebraska. I never thought about it. And so she said, yeah, Omaha. She's like, Omaha's a cool city, but Countryside's got a lot of good things going on. They're an awesome church. And so I was like, okay. She's like, so we're just asking me, Mary Cypress, who I'll say no, but I'm not close friends with like I was Diana, but she's a colleague of mine, a Methodist colleague within California Pacific Conference of the UMC. And she had started a consulting business and stuff. So good people. And so she was helping them do a nationwide search for somebody for the worship person and somebody for the faith formation engagement person. And she was like, when I saw that interim engagement person job, I thought about you. And so I gave Mary your name. I was like, okay. So I went and looked it up and I was like, I see why she thought about me. These are all of my favorite things in the same job in Omaha, but in the same job, it gnawed at me. So I started working on my resume that day. It wouldn't let me go. I knew it was God because it wouldn't let me go. And by the early of the next morning, I was already psychologically on Central Time. I woke up at 4 a.m. I was like, oh my gosh. I normally wake up at 6 something. And I was up at 4 and I was like, I got to finish this cover letter. And I did it. And within 7 minutes, Diane Poots wrote me back. We are so excited to get your thing and we'll be in touch or whatever. And so then it was like interview every week was an interview for like 3 weeks and all these different things. And I was ridiculously in love. I was just ridiculous. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just was in love. And so I loved y'all before I knew you,
Beautiful. So I know you've had some cool experiences that would be the reason that someone like Diana Butler Bass would suggest you for this. So perhaps you could tell us a bit about a bit more. I know you mentioned the Asian Rural Initiative, but you haven't mentioned the Building Beloved Communities yet. And can you tell us a little bit about both of those unique opportunities that you've had?
Sure.
And what you maybe learned from each of them?
Yeah. So the Asia and Rural Institute, since I started with that, I'll just flesh that out a little bit more. When I was in between my first and second year of seminary, I signed up for this thing called the Global Justice Volunteers Program. And usually they send people at 18 to 25, and I was in the older range of that because I was going to second year of seminary. And so they usually send people in groups of 2 or 3 to developing countries. But since I was older and had a year of seminary under my belt, they could only send one. They said, would you like to go to Japan? And I said, Japan is not a developing country. They said, don't worry, where you're going, you will work hard with people who are from developing countries, and you will get the justice thing, and it will be, you're going to learn a lot. And so I went off to Japan alone. Like I said, this is how I roll. God tells me to do something and I just go do it. And I didn't know Japanese, but I just went and just jumped right into the whole Japan experience. And so I went to this place. It was started by the Japanese Christians, but it was very, very interfaith, on a farm in Nishinasano, Japan. And their tag is that they all may be one. And they believe that being one should be centered around our relationship with the land and food. And don't we all? Right? And so this location matters. We can get to another thing. So bringing people together, sharing the land, doing the gardening thing, sharing food. Yeah, my first thing with that was Asian Rural Institute. And so they had already been working with people from developing countries for quite some time. Takami Sensei is the guy who started it. And so he had this vision that if, in fact, you bring people together and you really empower them on how to be, doing sustainable agriculture and how to be, kind to the land, and then teach them the tools for how to organize their communities. Not only will you feed people, but you will empower people to be able to help their communities. And so, when I was there were people from India and Haiti and Sri Lanka. Oh, Himali. I should send this video to Himali. Hey, Himali. And Zambia. Hey, Judy. I'm still friends with these people 20 years later, right? And so the kinds of relationships that we built there, Bangladesh, Tapoti, so were really substantive. And for me, as a white American, it was also, I'm really pro this, going into a culture where you are not the majority is extremely informative in so many ways. And so being a person who was not Japanese and was not any of these other things either, was sort of humbling for the girl from Alabama, right? So I learned some things about sustainable agriculture, farming, and interfaith, but also some things about what does it feel like to be the outsider. I highly recommend it for people who are white in America to do this, to send your children to places, to have these sorts of experiences. Like this is a good thing. You will have to check yourself and your understandings and your assumptions in a way that you wouldn't if you're the majority everywhere you go. So those things were all very, very informative, very instructive, and helped to form my adult life in a substantive way. So building the beloved community. When I went back to Alabama after 16 and a half years in California, I went back to do this crazy thing, which was be on staff at the largest Methodist campus ministry in the country, the Auburn Wesley Foundation, run a student pastor program, do these 3 small churches, run a graduate student ministry all at the same time. But that wasn't enough, because I saw that social justice things needed to happen. And I knew there were not a lot of voices that were going to step up and step out and do that. And so I got really involved. One of my churches was in Macon County, Alabama. And Macon County is where Tuskegee is. And some of y'all will know about Tuskegee University, one of our HBCUs. And I became really close friends with Audrey Rogers. If you see this, hi, Audrey. And so that Audrey and I did a lot of work with the young people between Auburn Wesley and Tuskegee Wesley, reading Howard Thurman, reading Martin Luther King Jr., doing all these things where we had substantive conversations between the Auburn students that were multicultural, but primarily white, and the Tuskegee students who were primarily African-American. And so those were meaningful conversations. But as a consequence of, and I preached in Tuskegee Chapel, but then around Tuskegee various times, because I was really involved with the Clergy Association. Hello, y'all. If you see this, I love y'all so much. I'm going to stop doing that, but I just feel like all these people have mattered so much in my life that if they do see it, I want them to feel the love. I would preach around in different churches and things when invited to do so. But as a consequence of being on that ministerial council, I ended up getting an opportunity that was really quite amazing. There was a lady that was there the first year that I was back in Alabama who had been hearing me talk at the Macon County Ministers Council. And I didn't even know, I mean, we barely got to talk, just she and I, because she had cancer the whole time. And she died in the fall of that year. Her name was Sarah Head. And when she died, we did a funeral. I went to her funeral. And this woman came up to me at the funeral. And she said, Sarah told me about you. And I was like, she did? What'd she say? And then they said, she said, you're serious about justice. I said, well, I certainly try to be. And this woman who had talked to me about this was Joan Harrell, Reverend Dr. Joan Harrell. And I went home and Googled her. And she was really, when she said justice, she was meaning the capital J of justice, because she had done all this stuff about racial justice and other things. She has quite a resume. And so I was like, oh, she's serious. She says, I want you to think about helping me with my beloved community event that I'm going to do for the 50th anniversary of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination. Would you consider helping with it? I said, sure, I would be honored. Ended up, not only did she want me to help with it, she did all this cool stuff like over a couple of days, had speakers come in. Sarah Collins Rudolph was there, where that was one of the only surviving member of the Birmingham 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. Y'all remember that from the civil rights time? Sarah Collins Rudolph was the only one that survived that. She was there. Otis Moss III was there. All these like important people. And then she says to me, hey, at the end, I'm going to invite people. I want to have a community conversation. I'm going to invite people to join this effort to build the beloved community here in Auburn. I want you to lead that conversation. I said, what do you want me to say? She said, just talk about justice and talk about love and talk about faith. And I was like, anything else? More clarification there about that? She said, no, just do your thing. And so I got up there and it was like a miracle. We had this incredible conversation, and then like 20 people signed up to be a part of that. And we started that thing with like 20 people. And today, the amount of people that are doing these workshops and Zoom meetings and activist kinds of things on racial justice and helping heal the long wounds of these oppressions and isms. Now that number, that it started in 2018, it's now in the hundreds of people. And I was there to help that first conversation, and they helped the first year of conversations as part of their core team. And it's just a beautiful thing. And so it was a very powerful thing to be a part of both of those things. And certainly I want to continue and empower others to continue building the beloved community, which I think this is very much building the beloved community here. And climate justice, and intentional community and co-location. All those things have been part of my life, and I'm here to continue it.
Yeah. So this question wasn't on the questions that I gave you before, but as you're speaking, I'm curious, we had our first clergy panel this last week, and many of the people who are on the call today were part of that conversation. And as we're looking for future collaboration, what about that clergy interaction, the getting to know yourself and getting to know everyone in public kind of part, or what surprised you? What was exciting about that? What does that bubble up in you for thinking about what else you can imagine coming forward?
Well, everything starts with building friendships with people, right? Building relationships with people. And I love that I already have all of these reasons. I see Joanna on the call. Joanna and I, we hit it off. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like that's going to happen with all these different people because we're already invested, literally invested in terms of the churches being here and the money, time, talents that it took just to create this place, right? But I believe that all of the clergy that are part of this are already have a bent towards making the best out of this collaborative co-location kind of a model. And so I'm excited about getting to know each of these people, building these relationships, because each one, I come with my own story and my own gifts and talents, and each of them do too. And so as we start learning where our gifts and talents and interests start, already have a symbiotic relationship, this will end up birthing things that we cannot yet name, right? Because I don't know them, they don't know me well enough to be able to say, we both like this particular brand of prayer, right? Or this particular brand of communication, or all of these different things, which these are like very generic, what I'm saying. Like, I like underwater basket weaving. So do you. Let's have an underwater basket weaving class. I don't like underwater basket weaving. That's a random example. But so I think it froze.
We can still hear you.
Oops. Okay, good. So in any case, so there will be things that we discover about one another where I think starting with places of natural collaboration will strengthen our relationships to such an extent that when we get to places where we don't have symbiosis, we will be able to work on those things better because of the depth of our relationship.
Okay, I got to call you out on that one. You came to us and started your relationship in the middle of a crisis in the Middle East, and we called you into that conversation as one of our first pieces. And ouch, there are a lot of people who would not have navigated that well. Tell us a little bit about what your experience being called into that has been like in the last weeks.
Well, my experience, again, I'm starting with listening, right? And so as I watched the conversation, because realistically, this moment, the fight in the Holy Land, while the Christian community is part of it, most of the major discord is between the Jewish voices and policy and the Palestinian and their wants and needs and policy. And so I felt, I needed to discern where people were on these kinds of
Interesting time to break up. Let's be patient here for just a minute. Anna, we lost you for a moment. Are you back? There are no accidents here. Oh dear. All right, she'll join us back again and we will
I'm
let her
back, I'm
finish.
back, I'm back. What
Okay,
did-
good.
See, God doesn't even want me to comment. God didn't even. I'm like, God's like, no, Wendy, don't do it. So, so there was a point at which one of our,
You weren't listening.
yes. Oh, really? Y'all missed
Mhm.
that one. So listening to our partners, and there was a point at which one of our partners was like, you know, I can't sign on to this if it's like this. And I said, well, if it's not all of us, then I'm not signing on either. Because I don't want to be like these two or those two. And so I stood up and said, either we're in it together or we're not. And so, you know, just kind of watching and then watching the dialogue and putting forth what I wanted to say from the Christian perspective. Don't repay evil for evil and those kinds of things, you know, moving towards peace. But in the end, the two other communities had some disagreements about the actual language that was going to be put in. And we sort of, for that moment, agreed to disagree, or they agreed to disagree. I felt kind of like I'm watching it and I want to participate, but at the same time, there was a couple people that were like, it has to be this way or it has to be that way. And so we're not going to agree on everything. In general, we're just not going to agree on everything, but we have to keep trying. We have to keep listening. And we also have to make sure that if we're doing something together, that we're doing something together and not intentionally exclude certain voices. And I would hope that the other people in the comments would also say that if I was feeling uncomfortable with something they were saying. That's just respecting one another.
Thank you. Wow. Well, I really do appreciate all that you have shared. Jeremy, I can't get this link to share in with everyone for the survey. Do you think that you could share that out for me? I would appreciate it. Thank you, Pastor Anna, for sharing so much about yourself. I hope that those of you who spent the hour with us feel that you know a little bit more about your journey, and we are so grateful that you and Pastor Tracy are walking with us forward, and that all of you have spent the day with us. Thank you so much for your time, and may we go from strength to strength.
Amen. Thank y'all. Appreciate you. See you later.